Welcome to A Rabbi and a Lawyer Walk Into a Bar, a podcast with relatively well-informed and irreverent musings on religion, news, and society. And now, for your hosts, Rabbi Asher Lopatin and John Geringer.
Hey, John, how are you?
Hey, Asher. So let me get this straight. You went all the way to Ghana to get away from Pesach cleaning.
It was an opportunity I couldn't pass up, but I got back in plenty of time to help Rachel out. I did the dishwashers and I kosher dishwashers. So that's, from long, long ago. I've done some stuff, but you're right. It was a crazy time to go away.
Are you sure you're not a CIA officer?
I'll say I was whisked through security because my travel guide is friendly with the immigration people so they whisked us right through the airport. I didn't have to go. It was one of those VIP things, another VIP thing. Very nice.
Okay, you got to start from the beginning. Why were you in Ghana?
I found out that the ambassador to Ghana, many people on this podcast might know him, is Ro'i Gilad, who was the consul general in Chicago for 4 years.
That is the Israeli ambassador to Ghana.
Exactly. He and Nitza live there. And when I found that out, I said, hey, this would be an opportunity of bringing Black pastors and rabbis together. Ghana it's a very painful history of where there are the Dutch and British and Portuguese slave castles where they would bring the slaves down from the north. And Ghana is on the coast, at least the southern Ghana, and they would bring them into these dungeons and then they would ship them off every 3 months in ships. There's a really very painful, I have not been to Auschwitz, but it really felt, you're really there, the horrors of how they kept these slaves. And so it has that part of it that's very poignant and moving for everybody, but in particular for many Black people, and many people trace themselves back to Ghana. And then it has the Israeli ambassador, and there are some projects that Israel is trying to do with Ghana. So I thought it'd be a really great opportunity. It's always great to bring people to Israel, but here it's doing something like that with the focus on the Black history.
How many Jews are in Ghana?
Well, you should know, of course, there's a Chabad house, and
Of course.
they were able to get a minyan. It's amazing. The rabbi and his wife gave birth when I was there in France. So they were in France, and they left the Chabad house up to his 13-year-old son. And he pulled together a minyan, and there aren't that many Jews there. They're like, I don't know, 20 Jews. He pulled a minyan together on Monday morning when I got in. It was amazing.
To their credit, they train them young. We've got some Chabad kids that come to our house every Friday afternoon and give a Devar Torah. They are absolutely poised as can be for a 13-year-old.
Yeah.
And do what they can, and they're trained young.
Yeah.
It's a good internship program.
There aren't that many Jews there, but this actually the project that Israel had been working on, and they hope to work on with a community-based resource organization, is caring for kids with disabilities, with muscular dystrophy. Look, the whole trip, the people are beautiful, but it's a very poor country. And we talked about last time, I was just in Damascus a month ago. That was like a cakewalk. Damascus is real.
That was Club Med compared to Ghana.
It's not India. I've been to India. It was a while ago. It has people on the streets and begging and all that. This is people. There's a hustle and bustle in Ghana, and they're selling things, but it's just so poor. And there's the houses, the huts, and the sheds, and people living in no sidewalks, and just really. It was a difficult trip.
I ask you this question every time you go somewhere crazy. What did you eat?
Chabad had dinners, which was very nice. We got dinners from Chabad. I had schnitzel and I had some tilapia. And then I brought a lot of tuna fish, packs of tuna fish. I had that in reserve, but I had a lot of fruit. I ate a lot of fruit. The one thing amazing, the cell service in Ghana is amazing. I didn't need Wi-Fi. I had the AT&T Universal plan and amazing cell service, but very hard to get Diet Coke. Very hard.
The important things in life.
Exactly. I went, it was to see if I could do it. And now I gotta try to bring a whole group of black pastors and rabbis, and I think it'll be a very meaningful trip. But I really wanted a short trip. Doesn't have to be a long trip. It's 2 nights, really.
Wow, that's
That's
incredible. Which reminds me, you mentioned slavery, and a lot of people ask questions about in the Torah, it talks about slavery. So, how are we supposed to think about it that it was at some point part of our tradition? And how do we think about the fact that it's part of what we talk about from time to time with what we read in the Torah? It's a fact of our faith at one point, and how it's evolved into being forbidden.
I think that really it's not great. And there's Rabbi Berkowitz talks about it, but it was nothing like American slavery. It was like indentured servitude. A slave, the halacha is a slave has to observe Shabbat and has to keep all the commandments that are not time bound, positive ones. Like a slave will have to eat matzah on Pesach and talk about freedom. So it's nothing like Egyptian slavery was, and it's nothing like American slavery was. I think in a lot of lands, even thinking the Ottoman Empire, slaves became empowered. There's something about American in the New World. I'm not saying it's just the colonies, but all over the inhumane way they treated human beings, it was unfathomable. And the way they shoved people in rooms and ships. And so I think, yes, I think we've evolved from the slavery in the Torah, but in the Torah, there are guidelines. For instance, in the Torah, if you harm your slave, like you harm one of their limbs, you have to set them free. It was nothing like that in
And
America.
aren't you generally supposed to treat them better than that you treat your family? In other words, they eat first and things like that.
Yeah, it talks about that, those rules. So, yes, I don't like the institution of anyone being bonded, everyone being not being free to leave their job, but it was just something totally different. And yet you're right that I'm sure slave owners in America use the Bible as proof that they were doing something legitimate. I had a discussion with someone today about, is there anything inherent in any religion, inherently good and inherently bad? And it's embarrassing that I wish all the Jews in the 18th and 17th century were big abolitionists, and 19th century, but many were and many weren't. And now looking back on how the Torah describes slavery, I would say it's totally different from this kind of slavery. But it's,
I wonder what they felt when they did their seders. And
yeah.
we talked about all men should be free, and then they themselves were part of this disgusting practice.
You're saying Jewish slaves in
No, Jewish folks who facilitated the slave trade.
yeah, yeah. I don't know how human beings, but sadly we see it with Hamas, how human beings they could just lose. It's not it's and I don't want to say this is like animalistic because animals don't do this. And even when cats are a little bit sadistic towards little,
And
chicken.
nobody likes cats, so go ahead, you can make fun of cats.
There is something sadistic sometimes in cats. They're wildest, but I think cats are a little bit embarrassed about it, at least when they do it, when they mess around with a little chickie or a little mouse or something. We're seeing this, it's hard, but I do think that it makes Pesach even more poignant, the idea of that we got to be striving for freedom and the voice for letting people be. It's a little bit of a progressive holiday. What can I say? Freedom, letting people be the best they could be, the humans being they need to be. So I'm really glad I did it. I'm excited to hopefully bring folks there. And I think it'll be a really great way of having Jews and African Americans and talk about these kind of issues and where we stand today, how we can really work together. And I do think, I don't know, just I see Syrian Muslims and Jews working together for a free Syria that will be beneficial for Israel. And I think that likewise, the Black and Jewish communities, there's a lot of good stuff we could do together. So we'll see what happens with that.
Are you doing anything different this year at your Seder regarding our hostages?
Yeah, so I just listened to another Dan Senor has a great podcast of Call Me Back, and I listen. And now I commute every day, 3 days a week, 45 minutes. So I definitely listened to all of those podcasts, and he had Rachel Goldberg Poland on, who's
Wow.
from Chicago, and it was really powerful. And first of all, how do you celebrate freedom when our hostages are being held in these horrible conditions in Gaza? And what she just two things that she said, because some folks who are listening to us might have probably listened to that other podcast. They have a good readership also, good
They
listeners.
cheat on us?
Yeah, I think those come out a little bit more often than ours. But one thing she said is that on the Seder plate, have like a lemon on it, something to symbolize the hostages. She talked about an unopened yellow flower that's not in water, that's shriveling. Something very poignant. And then she talked about this one really struck me about we have the eggs in salt water. We also dip the karpas in salt water. But she suggested, oh, this is so painful, that everyone drink plain salt water. Everyone should have a sip of just salt water that they drink. And many of the hostages have talked about that they were forced. That's all they could drink. The water was like salt water, whether it was from the sea or whether it was just filled with iron or whatever.
Wow.
And but I just think that this year maybe I remember my father, of blessed memory, would always say, Hans, this salt that needs more salt in the salt water. Not salty enough for the eggs. So normally like these things like okay, it takes a little bit of egg and salt water, karpas and salt water. It's like a luxury almost. This year, maybe doing it very different. I would almost add a another question to the Mani Shana. In all other years, we dip the karpas in salt water. This year, we drink salt water. Yeah, so that was just really, I haven't even, after listening to the podcast, haven't even gotten a chance to talk to Rachel about it. I think we really, we want to do that. And of course, have, I think, a seat set aside. I'm sure many people are doing that. Have you
Yeah.
thought of things, John?
Yeah, we're going to do something like that and maybe put some pictures, some hostages on the plate to
Yeah,
symbolize all of them who are left. And yeah,
wow.
it's tragic. And I was thinking about this the other day in our morning prayers. Every day we say Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, Matir Asurim,
Yeah.
who sets captives free. And it's interesting that, that's always been embedded in there. And we never thought about it as a big deal. You'd say it as a throwaway. Yeah, we want to set the captives free. But the last couple of years, boy, when we think about it, it really is so poignant.
Yeah, it's so interesting also because it's such a contrast. The different versions, but most Sidurim have all the negative Shalo Asani this, Shalo Asani that, Shalo Asani that. God didn't make me a slave, and those three negatives, and it's almost and then you have all the positives. Oh, but God did free me and gave me strength and all that, and gives the weak strength. Now it's almost like saying Lo Hitir Asurim. God didn't free all those that are still captive. Look, we're grateful. The other thing Rachel Goldberg said is the Dayenu teaches us we got to be grateful for everything. And she's so amazing. I remember at the funeral, she talked about how she was grateful for the 23 years she had with Hirsch. And so we're grateful for the freedom that we have and for the strength that we have, and that Israel is strong and is able to fight back. Yeah, but it's really it's a tough year.
Thinking about Seder, what are some of the FAQs that you've been receiving?
There's a little bit of a battle with quinoa. Not so much that it's kitnia, and most people say it's fine quinoa, but whether it needs supervision, special supervision, or
And
whether
remind everyone the whole discussion around
yeah,
Kitnio.
Quinio developed in the Middle Ages. It either is because little legumes, well, I don't want to say corn or beans, little kind of things. Either it's because maybe they had some wheat, they were mixed with wheat. So people avoided using them in Ashkenazi, in German and European countries. And then maybe some people, there are a whole bunch of reasons given. Maybe it's because they can be made into flour, so
Wow.
that some opinions even said don't eat potatoes because you have potato starch, but most people don't follow that. So they developed this custom in the Ashkenazi European Jewish circles of not eating these kidney out. And the question is, things that, what about peanuts? They didn't even have peanuts in when they made this decree against these kind of legumes. They didn't have peanuts. They're from the new country, from America, from the new world.
Right.
So there's a whole discussion, are they good or bad? And those who are old enough will remember that peanut oil used to have an OU on it for Pesach, OUP, but then somewhere around 30 years ago, it stopped being OUP.
Someone
So
got strict.
yeah, some things get stricter, but some things get more lenient. Counters, people don't, you don't need to cover that. You can steam them. There are even opinions that you just wipe them down. So things have gotten a little bit plastic now.
Yeah, it used to be that you'd have your kitchen look like the space shuttle
Exactly,
with all
exactly.
the aluminum foil everywhere.
And contact paper and all that. So it's not something that got leaner, something that, but there is a discussion whether that's going around. And one thing that's interesting also is induction ovens. I don't, do you have, John? Do you guys have a fancier? Then we in a fancy suburb?
Nah, I think we just a normal old-fashioned vanilla oven.
Yeah. Induction is this amazing, miraculous thing that it doesn't get hot, but it heats up the pot or something like that. There's an interesting discussion. I follow the opinions that it's much easier to kosher an induction oven because the burners don't really get so hot. Nothing really gets that hot. You have to use special kosher for Pesach pots, but it's the pot that gets hot really and the stuff inside. So it's much easier to kosher. Other people have different opinions about that. I got some induction oven questions and
You had to learn a little bit about science, huh?
yeah, a lot of questions about what are we going to do? It's Shabbat, Erev Pesach. How are we going to have our regular Shabbat meal? How are we going to have our challah on Shabbat morning?
Yeah,
And
I've read things about you can have challah on Saturday, but then you've got to flush the remainder down the toilet, like crazy stuff like that. Why? I presume because you don't want to have to own it, but can't you just throw it away outside?
it's interesting that the idea is that you have to destroy it. You can't burn it on Shabbat.
Because our toilet is bad enough without challah going down it.
Yeah, it's very true. But the idea of the toilet is you're flushing it into the sea. So you've seen all those the fish movies. What are they? Nemo, right? You got the
Nemo's
toilet.
eating challah now?
Oh, but they're connected to the ocean to get back into the ocean. And
Okay.
you got the toilet's the route to go. Oh. So there's that. But what we're gonna do is, I don't know what you guys are gonna do in your shul. We're gonna take a break after Shacharit, like around 10:15, and we're gonna give out little rolls. We're gonna make kiddush, finish the roll. We gotta finish it, and then you're done, and then you've had your meal. And
Got it.
then later on, after shul, you can have a regular meal. Other people do use egg matzah. I'm a big fan of egg matzah, but
Because normally there's a, I don't know if want to say it's a hard prohibition, but a soft prohibition on not having matzah 30 days before Pesach.
so that's that's matzah that you could use to fulfill your obligation of at the seder.
Which
But
egg matzah is not unless you're
right.
sick or infirm.
Even if you're sick and infirm, you can eat it according to Ashkenazim on Pesach, but you can't fulfill your obligation of
Got it.
matzah. You got to eat
Got it.
the real thing on at the Seder,
Got it.
just at the Seder. So that's another crazy thing. The Ashkenazim don't eat egg matzah during Pesach. I don't know. I'm 60 already. Have I hit the age that I can eat it? What is elderly? Is it
You're not
AAR?
infirm yet.
No, thank God, thank God.
What
But
about the Seder itself? What about interesting things that you brought along the way that people should know about?
I think that the main thing is to have conversations. It shouldn't be frontal. I know there's a lot of reading. Again, I don't have to do all the readings. More important are good conversations. We always have good conversations. The four sons or the four children, different personalities, and those are always a great opportunity. And I think don't limit those conversations. Those we're talking about the mitzvah is telling about the exodus from Egypt, but it's really about telling about the freedom. And the verse that we get it from is Vihigarata Levincha. You should tell your child. So it's not so much of a frontal discussion, it's how do we pass this tradition to the next generation. And bincha could be a student, like it's another person. Like anyone who learns from someone else is like a child, their child. So we're all each other's children, really. So how do you pass this a passion for Judaism and for everything it stands for to the next person, whether it's the next generation or whatever it is? And John, it's such a tough thing. I know just to how do you pass that down? And so that's why it's got to be more of a focus. The verse is a focus on do whatever it takes to make it a meaningful, exciting Seder for the children or for people that want to learn, or all of us that, rather than just a Seder where all the details, like a lecture, it's not supposed to be a lecture, it's a focus.
Or a pre-planned play straight out of the coffee hug
Right.
Maxwell house.
Maxwell House, yeah, I think from 1932. I think those are the originals, 1932. Wow, wow.
We still use them.
Yeah, and it'll be God willing, in 7 years, it'll be the 100th anniversary of that Haggadah. It's amazing. Interesting, we're talking about another thing that'll come up is who is the bigger anti-Semite? Is it Pharaoh or is it Lavan? Lavan, I don't know if people know, Lavan was Jacob's father-in-law, and he's a minor character. He tried to cheat Yaakov. That's why Yaakov got Leah first, and then Rachel. And so he was a cheat, and then he chased Yaakov, and God said, "Don't cause him any harm." And Lavan said, I would have blanked, but God told me not to. That's Jackie Mason. One more word and I would have. But I think today's world, it's a real important question. And really post October 7th, even before that, like who is the threat? Is it right wing? Is it far left, the far right? Is it both? Is it who are the people that are really scaring us? And that
and who's pulling the strings behind them and who's funding them. We're seeing all these lawsuits popping up where they're actually showing. I know we've talked about this before on the podcast about how you've got First Amendment here in the United States, but what you cannot do is provide material support to a foreign terrorist organization. In these lawsuits, they're showing how close they are getting, in fact, going over the line on providing material support and actually coordinating with Hamas, taking marching orders from Hamas. And then the question is, how are they coordinating? How are they being funded? And what was hidden is now become out there in the open.
Yeah, there's a film that I've not seen yet, October 8th. I don't know if you've seen it.
Yeah, it was great. And I knew some of the people who were interviewed there, and it was a great movie that included the guy I teach with, actually a case that he was involved with where he prosecuted the Holy Land Foundation.
Oh, yeah.
Which was, we should get him on the podcast. One of the big, actually the biggest terrorism financing case against Hamas. And in fact, tomorrow night, he's going to be giving the presentation in our class on that, which is always fascinating. All sorts of cool twists and turns and things like that. The point, and he's very careful. And even as a federal prosecutor, believes very strongly in the First Amendment and people being able to speak out however they want. But there is a line, and material support for terrorism, there is a line that cannot be crossed.
Yeah, I think this year will be a really interesting year. First of all, you got to say we're all at the Seder, we're all family, friends, no one's leaving. But I think there might be some really interesting quarrels because the question will be, first of all, identifying who are the greater threats to the Jewish people and frankly to the world, to Israel. Then how do you deal with them? Are you kicking them out of the country? Are you threatening the universities? And I think there's going to be a lot of interesting conversations at the Seder table about that.
Yeah, and we've already had them in class, and I know we're going to have them this weekend.
Yeah, but please, the most important thing is stay civil, stay at the Seder, enjoy each other, and it should be like brainstorming. Put everything out on the table. You're not going to resolve it at the Seder. I've heard like these conversations, they even not at the Seder, they go till 1 a.m. or whatever. I think it'll be a good say, really a lot of juicy stuff to talk about that are really connected to the theme of Yetziat Mitzrayim, of Pharaoh. Who are the pharaohs? Who are the Laban, the Lavans, and who are our enemies? And it mentions, talks about in every generation, B'chol dor vador, coming aleinu l'chalotenu, they come up to destroy. Who is it now? Who is the enemy? And there's a lot of politics that comes in there, but I think that's great. And my father always said they interpret the rabbis in Bnei Brak, Rabbi Akiva and Co. And they were all in Rabbi Elazar and Azariah. They were all in Bnei Brak. And my father always used to follow that this interpretation. They were talking about the Roman Revolution, to whether to rebel or not. Rabbi Akiva was a great leader, the Bar Kokhba Revolution. They were talking politics, but it was politics relating to freedom, exodus from Egypt. Where are enemies? Where do we go? How do we stay out of Egypt? So, how do we get to the promised land? So that's if you can keep it connected, I think it'd be very powerful.
Yeah, and Tim Snyder in his book on tyranny, 20 lessons from the 20th century, one of them is make eye contact and small talk. This is not just polite, it's part of being a citizen and a responsible member of society. It's a way to stay in touch with your surroundings, break down social barriers, and understand whom you should and should not trust. As we enter a culture of denunciation, you will want to know the psychological landscape of your daily life. You can only do that by getting off of social media and having these discussions. And it sounds like the Seder is the perfect place to do it.
Yeah, yeah. So, like in that vein, who are your enemies? So, I was at a city hall meeting, city council meeting at the Chelsea, Michigan. Chelsea is in my Washtenaw County. It's 20 minutes from Ann Arbor.
Okay.
And it's Ann Arbor's U of M. So, a lot of professors live in Chelsea.
Is it technically part of your turf?
It is all of Washtenaw County. It's a very broad, big county. So I have a big district to pastor to, whatever, to community relations to.
Yeah.
It's a very charming town. It's where Jiffy Cake is from. So Jiffy Cake, that's where it started, Chelsea Mills. And it surrounded a man that I eventually have met over the last week. Very nice Christian, but loves Judaism and is progressive. And
Uh-oh, I feel a butt coming.
yeah, they have comment. They let anyone talk at these, you have the comments, you have 5 minutes, anyone get up there and vent to the city council. And I heard,
This is like the show Community, right?
yeah, exactly. And there's this one person that constantly vents right-wing conspiracies, tells them Trump's going to get you, you're going to be locked up, all this stuff. And this city council member lost it and said, yeah, Heil Hitler to you, something like that, Heil Hitler. And mocking this person.
Oh no.
So very bad. I love to see, John, look, you taught this, that you taught how societies become fascist and I mean, and you're a child of a survivor. But this is such a good man. And look, it's a public record that I spoke for him. I said, look, he said something very bad. He apologized for it. It's harmful, it's hurtful, and he's a good man, and he's on his values, and as the Jewish community, he shares the values of the Jewish community, and yet his fellow council members censured him tonight. So it was a little,
Wow.
but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe no, that's like the ultimate, like some mistakes you make are irreparable, almost irreparable. And other times it's a mistake, it's a boo. So what are your
Yeah,
thoughts?
I don't believe in cancel culture. I believe in second chances. And I also believe clearly the intent was not to say
Right.
Heil Hitler. The problem was it's more, what is it, Godwin's law, right? Whomever mentions Hitler first loses the argument.
Yeah.
And yeah, the problem is it's too easy to go to Hitler to talk about anyone these days in society, the president or whomever. You're going to lose that argument. And so I think we should be nuanced in how we treat our fellow people. And clearly, this was not intended to just the whole controversy around Elon Musk. Was he really doing the Seek Heil
Yeah,
hand movement, and then they showed other people doing the Sieg Heil hand movement. I'd
yeah,
rather care about bigger issues.
I agree. So when I was leaving the city, this was so interesting. This city is now mostly very liberal, but then there were some people talking about how the city's been mean to the police, and so there are right wingers and left wingers. And then this never happened to me when I was leaving. So some of the people, clearly not Jews, in the that were there said, "Oh, thank you so much, Rabbi. Thank you for speaking up for him, and thank you." And then two women said, "Shame on you." And that's okay. I've had that, but I couldn't figure out, are you right wingers or left wingers? Because
Have you ever had shame put upon you before?
I don't I think maybe they thought I was compromising Judaism, like I was a sellout or something. But I said it was wrong. I don't know. So it was just, but I just couldn't figure out because also then one of the guys that seemed like a right winger about the community doesn't treat the police properly and limits what they can do and they can't throw out immigrants, something like that, anti-immigrant. And he was like, "Oh, thank you." He was like really nice. But the councilman that I'm defending, I thought is a Demo, is like a liberal guy. I could not figure out what was going on. I guess
Maybe you hit it perfectly. This reminds me of when I was a lifeguard in the Skokie JCC, and half the complaints were the water was too hot, and half the complaints were the water was too cold. And I knew I'd hit it. And
yeah.
so this is the same kind of thing.
John, that's a great comfort. You have comforted me. That's
It's what they call equilibrium.
exactly, exactly. But it's funny that, oh my gosh, I guess you've got to really experience small town politics. That's where the exciting things happen. I think it is something again to think about, like where should the fight be in organizations like the ADL
Yeah.
that are trying to fight anti-Semitism? Where do you want to focus your efforts? And I don't know if years ago there was a woman who said the head of the Republican Party in Michigan, she was booted out. She was didn't work out. But she had a photograph of a gun and said if the Jews would have somehow Jews are not allowed to have guns. There was no gun law. And if the Jews would have had, there wouldn't have been a Holocaust. Basically saying if there would have been a Second Amendment,
Right.
would have been a
Oh,
Holocaust.
I've heard that one before. Yeah, not that it didn't take the USSR, America, France, Britain, and all the other armies collectively to take care of Germany, but a few Jews who had some Ruger pistols
Yeah,
here and there could have plinked off the entire German army.
yeah.
We do need to get beyond this grievance culture. And I hope we are. The problem is, I think the grievance culture has been the pendulum that it was the left that had the grievance culture. Now it's the right that has the grievance culture. We need to move beyond this and get to a place where we're solving real problems together collectively and not worrying about touching on every third rail of everyone's feelings.
It's so interesting. It's interesting coming from you because you really do. You dedicated yourself to the center and really studying. I mean, it's terrorism also, but I think that it seems that your center is really trying to study what are the real threats to
Yeah.
our world.
That's right. And just as I would agree with my co-teacher that if someone themselves says nice things about Hamas, maybe the FBI will look at them on their public social media. That doesn't necessarily mean I want them arrested. Now,
Yeah.
the guy we talked about on our last episode, he had crossed the line from free speech to activism and to probably material support. But if it's First Amendment stuff, I think I've mentioned this before. That is the one thing in law school that had me change my mind about Nazis marching in Skokie. That before
Wow.
I had taken my First Amendment class, I would have said absolutely not. And now I say absolutely yes, but that doesn't mean we can't protest as well.
So John, I think I was like 13. How were you? Were you a lot? You were 3 years old. How old were you then?
I was 6.
Oh wow. Did you go out with your little squirt gun or something?
No, but I did think we'd have tanks rolling down Dempster Street
Oh
in
my.
Skokie when I first heard about that.
You have Nazi tanks?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
When I heard the Nazis are coming, that was
Oh
my,
gosh.
now to speak some German, some Weltanschauung. That was my world outlook, that I thought there was going to be these tanks coming down the street.
Wow, wow. Yeah, that was an incredible moment. That was a piece of history, a really iconic moment, Skokie. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then in the end, did they march in the end?
Not in Skokie. They eventually wound up marching in Marquette Park. And I think there's
Oh,
actually video of a shirtless Rahm Emanuel counter protesting.
really? Okay. He's the man. We're nonpartisan, but
We're nonpartisan, but he, I think, would be a great future president. You heard it here first.
okay. I hope I gotta reacquaint myself. He's a product of Anshe Shalom, I would say. That's where.
Yeah, you might get that White House invite for the Hanukkah party from him.
That's right. Yeah, we'll see. So look, John, everyone's getting ready for Pesach, and we'll get this in. Hopefully, people are going to hear this before the Seder starts.
God willing.
And I guess keep it interesting and keep it civil. That's what I would say about the Seder.
Love it. And Chag Kasher V'Sameach. Have a kosher, I love how they say that, by the way, a kosher and happy holiday.
Yeah, and I know some people want to say, no, Chag Sameach v'Kasher, make it happy first, but this is a holiday you put in sweat equity, you work hard, you go through all the hoops to whatever it is that makes it kosher for you, but that leads to a real sense of accomplishment. I think thank God we're free now, but feeling a little bit of extra work, and that really lets you feel that sense of moving from Egypt to freedom.
Love it. All the best to you and the Lopatin family.
Great. You too, and the Geringers. Take care.
Thank you for listening to this episode of A Rabbi and a Lawyer Walk Into a Bar. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to get our next episode delivered right to you. If you really like us, please consider leaving a review and sharing this with a friend. That would really help our efforts. And finally, to contact us and for more show-related information, please visit our website, rabbilawyerbar.com. Special thanks to our production team, David Stone for the introduction music, Andrew Bauman for the artwork, and I'm Nicholas Tantillo. This podcast is co-produced with Front and Social Studios in Chicago. Disclaimer: the views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent. Copyrighted material, all rights reserved.